We're going to pick this up where we left off, except this time I'm going to take you through a drum kit that I didn't record, that was sent to me, so I can show you the same process through someone else's recording and make it sound like as if I'd done it. This particular drum track, the engineer who recorded it did the drums panning from the drummer's perspective. I do everything from the audience perspective because I feel like everyone's listening to music. They're sitting in the audience. They're not sitting on the stage. So I've always thought of the stereo image as you being the audience. If it's a right-handed drummer, the hi-hat's on the left and the floor toms on the right and so on. So I had to reverse this, which means I reversed the overheads and I moved the panning of the hi-hat to match the overheads. Normally when I have the hi-hat on a stereo panner, I always have it panned to about the number 43 to the right, which is what it is now. So if we look at this right now, you can see everything at 0. And this is un-EQ'd, so I'll play it for you the way it is now. You'll get an idea what it sounds like. Okay? The drum track is kind of loose within itself. So now if we're going to go in and turn this into what I normally would call the Val Garay method of balancing a stereo drum kit, remember that the out kick is way less than the in, and the snare is the same level as the kick drum, both sides in. Overheads hit -10 and the tom-toms are at 0. And the other thing that I told you was in the overheads, if you listen to the overheads, the snare drum should kind of be in the middle so that you don't pull the snare track off to one side. So if you listen right now to the snare drum in this overhead track, the way it's recorded, you can hear the snare drum is way over to the left. So now I'm going to open up the session that I've modified so that you get an idea of what the difference would be. This is the exact same session, but you can see the waveforms completely change size. And the reason for that is if you look at the balance of the kit, it's exactly as I've done it. So it's a 0 on the kick drum, -2 on the snare, and -10 on the rest of it. So if you go back to this, you have the out, which is supposed to be way less than the in kick, and you listen to it now, it's, as I said before, -10. When you listen to the in kick, which is, it's a -5, -4, like I said, and then combined, it's 0. Also, on this particular drum track, I felt like the low kick was a little bit shy in the low, sub-low end, so I added a little bit at 30 cycles on this Pultec. Gives it a little more bottom. I'll show you what that sounds like. I lowered the out kick 6.3 dB, and the way I surmised that was based on this level again, which is a -10. This in kick, I raised it 6 dB to get that to the -5 level because it was low. And then the EQ that I used is the usual roll out the bottom. That's a lot tighter. That gave me the kick drum sound. Then the top snare, I raised that 5.5 dB, and that's going to give me the level -5 kind of, and has a little bit of EQ where it's 4 dB at 10, 2 at 3, and then I added 4 at 100. And this is what it sounds like without it. Kind of small, kind of bigger. You'll notice also that you don't have to brighten the snare too much because it's really the overheads too that attribute to the edge of the snare drum. And then when you listen to the bottom snare, I raised that 5.5 dB because it should be less than the top snare. Just 2 dB at 10K. Just adds a little bite to it. The two of them together give you then you go to the hi-hat, and that's now at -10. And you can see from that that the level is pretty much drastically changed. I raised it 7 dB from where it was. And all I did to the hi-hat was I rolled out a ton at 50 on a peak. I rolled out a ton at 800, which takes the snare drum away, and add a little bit of 15K, put the kind of tinny, twinkly top end to the hi-hat. EQ out, becomes a snare drum. Now you can hear the hi-hat. Then you have the overheads, which these are raised 8.7, -7, right around. And then if you add the hi-hat, you should hear it jump in. The other thing that I did was in the tom tracks, because there was so much snare leakage in the top tom, I went in and edited so that everywhere there wasn't a tom fill, I lowered the inside of that track 6.5 dB. So now when you listen to the tom tracks by themselves, the snare drum is pretty much in the middle. But the toms still do the same even zero level. So then, when you take everything out and you hear this track set up the way that I always set up a drum session, and I didn't record these, -10, -2, 0, this is what the drum track now sounds like, and it's much tighter. Going back to the original beginning of the video where I talked about balancing a drum set with the monitors off, you virtually can do that. You can't EQ it that way, but you'll get a great balance that way. And the things you have to really be conscious of is the hi-hat mic getting hi-hat and not snare drum, the top tom and floor tom mic kind of evenly balanced in terms of the snare drum leakage, and you just got to move mics around until you find those spots. And it's pretty easy to do if you take the time to do it. And that's about it. So I hope this helps.